Okay, quick walkthrough to get you started on assignment 12 on covariance. So again, we're going to use GitHub. So go to this assignment link here. It should bring this up here. It should give you a link where the assignment should be created. And it should give you an initial posting here. There should be with some initial code here. You want to take this URL and copy that. So we say we're going to go and use the team menu and manage the connections. So in Visual Studio here, I've closed all my projects out. I'm going to go to Team, Manage Connection. It'll bring up my Team Explorer connection here. Under Local Git Repositories, I'm going to hit Clone, clone a new repository, enter in the URL here, and it will create one here. This is already here. I'm just going to rename this a little bit. To not because I've already cloned this before. Okay, now I'm going to clone this. And to clone it here, and then you'll want to open it up. It should be listed in bold here on your list. And so I'm just going to click on that and open that up by double clicking on it. Now it'll open up solutions, and again I've got to click on that solution file and open it up. Let's see. So I've just clicked on it, hit open. I want to open it up not in File Explorer but right in Visual Studio here. Now it should be open. You can always check it in your Solution Explorer when you switch there. If it's blank, you haven't opened it yet. It should show this this two projects, and in this we have basically three projects: a council project, a subtype covariance, and a supertype covariance test project that we'll be running. So I tried to run this project, it gives me these errors, so we can look and see what these errors are. So the first error I ran into is and I'm not sure if you're running the same error, but the start project is not set correctly. The console has the program .cs file, and this is the executable one, and this should be set as the startup project, and it should be bold. So you notice this one, my subtype covariance one is bold. So I'm going to right click on this and just say set as startup project. So this should get it to run to get to that error if you're having that error in the startup project. Then we should get to the actual errors in the program that the textbook goes over. So let's do a quick review of this code. Remember, we're looking at a subclass and a superclass. So entity is our superclass. It's just a generic or a type, and it has a user ID, a GUI ID, and a string, a unique ID, and a name. And then inheriting from entity is user, based on entity here, and it adds an email address and a date of birth to this. And then we have these repositories. We have an entity repository. We specify the ID, and it gets that and returns an entity with this get by ID, returns an entity. And that's going to be important, the type that's returned. User repository has a similar get ID. We specify the ID, but it returns a type user. And this is where we're getting into an error here because of this overrides user repositories get by ID overrides the entity one, but there's problems because this returns a user specific subtype where this expects an entity, and we get this compile error. Return type must be entity, must match the override membership ID. So that's what they're talking about in this error here, where we're trying to get ID returns the right type. It should be returning, well, the code wants it to be returning an entity, but we want it to return an actual user ID. So one way of kind of handling this is introduce an interface here between the two. So we're going to create this entity repository ID. So rather than having the generic repositories have an interface to the repository. So we had the entity repository. We're going to switch that to an interface I entity repository. It'll be an interface, and it'll use generic typing here. And then our user repository can refer to that interface rather than that. So your goal in this assignment is to fix the compile errors, and I'm not going to walk you through too much more, but just show you that. So right now the user repository as a parent of entity repository, and we're going to switch that so it's based on the interface, and we're going to define this interface here. And this code for this interface is going to be the same as shown in here. So this code here is going to go in its own interface, and then we're going to redefine user repository to use that interface. So right now user repository is based on the entity repository. And again, we're getting some errors because entity repository requires things in a certain requires get ID be an entity, and we want to return a user, so we're going to stick this interface in between. So you should be able to get this working and compiling without any errors. So when you get it working, it should compile without any errors, and then when you run it, it should just create an entity type Tom here without getting any errors. So it's just using the repository to create a new entity and setting that up. So see if you can get this to compile and run without any errors. Again, you're going to have to modify this user repository, create an interface here. You might also have to do some changes to the user so that it has a constructor in it. But you can read through this text. Again, this is the going into its own interface, and this is the change to the user repository as we go.